All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Tim Davey. This is the Public Outreach and Engagement Committee meeting for May 4th of PlanRVA. Good morning to everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Does everybody know everybody is on the line? Mr. Thornton, do you know everybody on the line?
I think so.
Good. Well, everybody knows you, so there is a statement on the agenda regarding virtual meetings for PlanRVA, which is our standard statement, obviously notifying everybody that this is authorized for us to go ahead and do this meeting virtually. Next on the agenda is roll call. Sid, I'll go ahead and let you do that.
You don't have to do anything because it's going to pick you up there.
Okay. Sorry, give me 1 second. All right. Chesterfield County, Tim Davey.
Here, morning.
Henrico County, Frank Thornton.
Here.
AVID Core, Amanda Roberts.
Here.
And Larry, I don't want to mispronounce your last name.
Schooler.
Cool. Okay.
Here.
Perfect.
That's good. That's everyone, Mr. Davey.
Correct. And so we're going to move into the update, Ms. Heater. So I believe the agenda is yours.
Yeah, thank you. So really just wanted to be able to give you all an update. The last time we were together was actually during the interviews for our on-call bench. And so pleased to let both of our committee members know that we have been able to secure accepted invitations for 6 of the firm teams that participated in the interview. So that would be all of the groups actually that you all participated in. And that information will be sent out to you by email. We've also provided that information to our local government public information officers and communicators. So I think some of those locality representatives are already in contact with some of the on-calls with work that they want to have done. We've also shared that information with other regional partner organizations. So Greater Richmond Partnership, the RMTA, the Capital Region Airport Commission, Richmond Region Tourism, GRTC, even though that they're a private agency, the Chamber of Commerce and other, kind of institutions here in the region. So we're excited about that. I'll also be sharing the information with our Virginia Association of Planning District Commission so that they're aware of the on-call program as well. One of our firm teams has kind of collaborated. I think that the team from AVID Core has volunteered to help us sort of put together some promotional information to be able to share just the ability and kind of some instructions for how to access the on-call program. And then there'll be the team from KLT, who you might remember meeting. They've put together kind of a worksheet for almost all of the firm teams to be able to sort of kind of at a glance summarize the services that each provides. So that'll be pushed out and put on our website and that kind of thing. So we're excited about that. As you know, this was kind of a big step for us to be able to just have the opportunity to launch this program, and it's going to be an exciting service, I hope, that we'll be able to provide and broker to our member jurisdictions. So I'm encouraged by the interest, I think, from about 3 jurisdictions so far that are really interested in using the program. Moving kind of forward, the next bullet, we did identify in our RFP 3 particular work products that our firm teams are working on. 2 of them are related to our emergency management program and keeping the emergency preparedness grant funded activities for public outreach alive. So West Carey Group is going to be updating by the end of this fiscal year our emergency preparedness guide. It's literally a handbook handout. Gotta say.
Yeah.
So it's literally a workbook that we provide when we do our emergency preparedness trainings out in the community. And that document will be kind of refreshed with some new content and that kind of thing, but pushed out in hard copy and digital format for continued promotion of emergency preparedness. And then they're also assisting with the remainder of our public outreach grant for social media, digital communications, and some public events that we're planning. We're going to be collaborating with the Flying Squirrels again this year to do a public safety night and some other things like that. We have invited the AVID Core team to join us today because I think one of the major thrusts of this committee as it goes forward in the next several months is going to be focused on our overall public engagement strategy. And Mr. Thornton and Mr. Davey, both of you have, I think, been very helpful in helping us frame the pretty wide range of goals that we have for this effort. And so I wanted to be able to introduce you again to Amanda Roberts, who's the lead from AVID Core. And she's going to tell you a little bit about where we are with the project, where we're going. You probably received an invitation already. And I know, Mr. Thornton, you have a conflict with the prioritization workshop. That's totally fine. We will keep you up to date through other channels, but wanted to be able to kind of give some context behind that and share with you what we're doing. The team has been awesome. They are staying on track and keeping us focused. And I think Larry, you're here to offer also some input, but I think you just really wanted to be able to hear again from Mr. Davey and Mr. Thornton about what their goals are in this project. So Amanda, I'm going to turn it over to you and would love for you to be able to just kind of give an update to the committee about where we are.
Yeah, happy to provide an update. I do have a few slides I put together, but it says the screen sharing disabled.
I will
Is there
fix
a
that
way
in just a moment. Yeah, for some reason. Are you able to
Yeah.
do that, Sid?
So while we're fixing that, I think I just wanted to start by reminding you of AVID Core and what we are. So we're a woman-owned, minority-owned small business based here in Virginia. We have teamed with 3 other small businesses. Let me go ahead and throw this and put this up. We've teamed with 3 other women-owned small businesses, Crenson West, which is a national firm that specializes in conflict resolution and strategic communications, Burford Advertising, which specializes in marketing and advertising, and 180, which specializes in organizational development and strategic planning. And so collectively, we provide we provide the full suite of services that PlanRVA was looking for when they issued the OnCall contract. So just diving into task order 1, there's 3 major components to this task order. The first is the community engagement assessment. And so at the heart, and then we use that information to develop the community engagement strategy, and then we'll also be delivering some sample materials. And so at the heart of our community engagement strategy is a plan rooted in diverse, inclusive, and equitable engagement. So to develop this strategy, we're doing a deep dive into data and information collection, which includes interviews, survey, benchmarking, and background research, and Larry's going to touch on that in a moment. We're going to compile all of that information into an assessment report that will allow that you will have a chance to review, that'll provide information on all of the data that we've collected. And then that data is going to be used to build our community engagement strategy, which will outline tactics for achieving PlanRVA's community engagement goals. And so we have listed here some of the stakeholders we're reaching out to as part of the community engagement assessment. And I wanted to turn it over to Larry to kind of provide an update on the status, because that's where we're at in the project right now.
Yeah, thanks very much, Amanda. I assume everybody can hear me okay. We have had some fantastic conversations thus far. As you look at the external list on the right, we've met with tribal representatives just yesterday. We met with the folks listed under community groups last Friday and the interest groups last week as well. We've also conducted one of the 3 interviews with what we're calling benchmarking agencies that were jointly selected by our team in PlanRVA. We put forward some suggestions, fielded suggestions from PlanRVA staff, and came up with the 3 that you see listed there. And just for awareness, OKI refers to kind of the greater Cincinnati region, Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana. Centralina is kind of a funny way of talking about, or Centralina, I'm not sure how they say it, but it's North Carolina and South Carolina, the Charlotte, North Carolina region. And then Campo refers to Austin, Texas, the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. And we have spoken with Joyce Myers just yesterday. Our interview with Ms. Platt had to be rescheduled due to an emergency. But we should have all of these meetings and conversations finished up by the end of this week. We've also had a chance to visit with a number of Martha's staff there at PlanRVA, which has been very helpful. And then we've also put out a survey and gotten, I think, around 5 or 6 dozen responses, which we'll be able to leverage as additional input for our assessment.
All right, thanks, Larry. So next up, as I mentioned, we'll be developing an assessment report. We'll be using that, we'll be distributing that prior to the prioritization workshop, which you should have received a save the date and calendar invite for. That's scheduled for May 25th. And then we'll be developing the draft community engagement strategy, allowing you to review and provide edits, and then finalizing that strategy and developing sample materials. So that's task order 1 in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions about status or next steps.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, Mr. Thornton and Mr. Davey, we wanted to be able to, and Amanda, could you go back to the slide of the internal and external stakeholders? Wanted you all, I think in particular, to be able to see this list and let us know if we've inadvertently omitted anyone. Obviously, we could not, through this process, engage with every stakeholder, and we did send a larger invitation for that survey that Larry mentioned, but these are the groups that are doing kind of the conversational part of the input, right, Amanda?
That's correct, yeah. Everyone in the external side, and others, but they were non-responsive to our invitation, so we tried to get even more than what's listed here to participate.
May I suggest something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, please.
I would perhaps encourage you to get in contact with some of your radio stations, because we want to make sure that we have everybody, want to be as inclusive as we can. And in addition to that, there are some Greek organizations, the fraternities and sororities, which can be very helpful. And I'm particularly sensitive to people of color. We want to make sure that they're not left out, and they can be reached by radio and usually by some of these sorority and fraternity groups. And I didn't see anything from any of the Black churches. That would be another group of persons when we try to make sure that as we get our word out. And I think for the other groups, they'll take care of themselves. But there are some groups sometimes that are historically kind of, they're difficult to reach sometimes. So I just want to throw in those couple of suggestions.
That would be great, Mr. Thornton.
Yeah.
Do you have, could you help us reach out to the fraternities and sororities and maybe some of the
I will prepare a list. And now I do know one radio contact was a very young lady. I don't know the call letters of the station, but her name is Miss Clovia Lawrence, very energetic in the community.
Okay.
And these are radios that will definitely go out to many people of color. And so what I would do, I would prepare a list for you of the sorority and fraternity groups with some names and some
Thank
addresses.
you.
Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you so much. Amanda, would that be a possibility to figure out how to incorporate them into our outreach?
Yeah, we can take a look and see what the next steps are there. It may be, we may need to do some kind of, because we're on a very tight time frame to get this work done. So it may be that we might need to incorporate that as part of maybe the task order 4 that we're working on with the Title VI work.
Yeah.
But if we get the
another.
information soon, we can figure out a way to incorporate that.
Okay, great.
Then the survey went out to everybody on the internal stakeholders being engaged. So the same one that we got as commissioners was the one that everybody else on the list on the left got.
That's correct.
Good. And then the external, your reach out to them has actually been conversations and meetings with them, not them just taking the survey.
I believe it's been both. So we have external folks that are, that list of external folks that receive the survey is a larger group than the either focus groups or interview conversations.
Okay.
Am
I right about that, Amanda?
Yeah, I think if some of the external parties are included on these lists, you know, if they were involved in the development of the long range transportation plan, for example, they would have received the survey. That's correct.
Okay. And then I did check my calendar, the 25th either I didn't receive that or at least don't have it on my calendar. So if we know what time that's slated for, I'll go ahead and block off my calendar now.
Okay, we'll send that. That invite came from Kearns and West. I think it was from Sam Ramsey, so it may have flipped off of here.
On my calendar.
I'll
What
send
time,
it to you right now, Tim.
It says 8. Martha's gonna send it, but it says 8:30 in the morning.
All right, perfect.
I just sent it to you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So any other kind of feedback or thoughts? I mean, as Amanda said, I think they're doing a great job of keeping the project on schedule. And as you know, that this particular piece of the work that they're doing is funded through the Community Foundation grant. And the deadline for completion of that phase is June 30th. And so.
Right. Deadlines are a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Amanda, do you want to speak a little bit to this, to we call it task order 4, but it's the second task order that's been awarded to the AVID Core and 180 team?
Yeah, that we can speak to that. Let me see. I don't have any slides for that piece,
okay.
So I'll just stop sharing.
Problem.
And there we go. So for the task order 4, that's also being conducted in 2 phases. First phase where we are doing some immediate updates to the Title VI plan. And what that entails is, so far we're having some internal conversations about their desires for that document. And then we're also talking with other regional planning organizations to get their insights on what best practices they've implemented with their Title VI plan, because the goal is not necessarily to just have a compliant document, but to have a very comprehensive document that encourages inclusive participation in all of the transportation planning efforts. So this but this first phase is it's on a very tight timeline as well. I believe in order to be responsive to Virginia Department of Transportation, we have to get a compliant document to them by mid-June. And so we are working hard to update that and just make sure that we, at a minimum, are going to pass that compliance test. The second phase is looking at some of those more longer term recommendations and activities that we can do to ensure the transportation planning organization is implementing, environmental justice activities and making sure that there is, equitable participation, as well as, the projects that are being developed are also equitable. So that second phase is where we're going to be spending a lot of more time thinking about going beyond compliance and making it a very robust document that achieves those goals. If that makes sense.
Thanks, Amanda. For a little bit of backdrop, just because I think this is a topic that we don't often talk about at the commission level. Title VI is a regulatory requirement in the federal code that is a requirement for all federal funding. So while it frankly shows up for us most often in our transportation program area, it is a requirement of all of our federally funded programs, emergency management, community development, environmental programs. And so one of the things that we're working to do is, frankly, to leverage the requirement that Virginia Department of Transportation has implemented to update our Title VI plan and pull that across our entire agency. So what we want to do is to be able to establish a Title VI planning document that will not only fulfill the requirements for the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization and its certification requirements, but to use that agency-wide for all of our program areas. Historically, we've kind of approached those cross-cutting federal requirements in a more of a siloed approach, and we're trying to build that continuity across the agency. So it's, I mean, to nerd out for a second, it's pretty exciting from kind of an administrative perspective to be able to do that. But I'm also really, really excited about the work that Amanda described in that sort of second phase, the above and the beyond kind of compliance portion. Lots of the conversations that we've had over the last 8 or 9 months around inclusive procurement, supplier diversity, really being much more focused on local minority-owned businesses, really being able to make sure that our purchasing power is used in a way that fulfills the emerging diversity, equity, and inclusion goals of the region is a component of this. Thinking more critically about how we can make sure that the meetings that we host are accessible and approachable by the persons particularly that we're trying to reach, those historically underserved and unserved communities, whether that be members of minority populations, non-English speaking persons, people with disabilities. I think oftentimes, I know myself personally, I am not as aware sometimes of how my surroundings might be limiting to someone who has a mobility, a difference in mobility than I do. And so we're going to be creating, I think, some really useful resources for staff and how they can think about meetings and make sure that they're inclusive to people that are not just like us. Similarly, we're going to be looking at our employment practices and trying to make sure that when we do recruit for personnel, that we are doing that in a way that is inclusive, that promotes and celebrates diversity among our relatively small staff. But, we do recognize that it's important for our staff and personnel to be reflective of the demographics of the community to the extent possible. So really kind of thinking about that. And that portion of the work that AVID Core will be leading will dovetail really nicely with another project that we have underway around staff succession management and, really making sure that we're giving every person on our staff team the opportunity to grow and develop in the organization. So I'm excited about it if you can't tell. And I think that it's going to be at the end of this process, Mr. Thornton in particular, hopefully a useful resource for the CVTA, as supplier diversity and inclusive procurement and things like that have been themes in the last several months, but also, as Amanda touched on, really making sure from an environmental justice perspective and project selection perspective, we really are prioritizing the investments that PlanRVA, plays a role in assigning, to make sure that the folks who need to be involved in the process the most have a chance to do that.
So, Martha, let me ask a question, just to sort of see how this relates to other elements of where federal funding touches transportation. So if the project prioritization list identifies a road and the road project is going to use federal funds, during the design phase, we have to go through every element of federal regulations like culture resources, threatened and endangered species, and all those things. And so over the years, organizations have been identified as the authority on culture resources. So when we go through that process, the state agency that is the authority is the Department of Historic Resources. And once the Department of Historic Resources signs off on the project, we're done, whether somebody wants to complain about it or not. That is the authority that actually measures whether or not we've complied with culture resources. Are we trying to be the authority that actually is the one who decides that there's been enough outreach and that social justice has been addressed?
Not necessarily. I think that that's a good question. I think what we are trying to do is sort of, in some regards, match those two processes and planning and implementation a little bit more closely together, so that, oftentimes I think, Tim, you know this better than anybody, the planning phase could happen a decade before the actual implementation and, Department of Historic Resources authorization that there's no finding of no significant impact, right? And I think what we're trying to do is kind of connect the dots a little bit and make sure that the community is brought along in that process, and we don't get to the point where we're at that point in the process of frankly being ready to execute on a project, and then the public becomes aware that a perceived vital community resource is being disrupted, or that should be occurring during the planning process.
Well, I would suggest we contemplate being the authority that handles and checks the box to say that there was significant public outreach, and possibly that there have been all of the social justice issues have been addressed, because there isn't an authority right now. So the scenario could be that when we get to the implementation phase, everything that PlanRVA facilitated gets tossed out the window because a new person moved to town and decided that they opposed the project for different reasons. I would suggest we contemplate who is the authority to measure and address whether or not community outreach has been done significant enough such that we can move the project forward, and or whether or not we want to be the group that actually is the scorecard for social justice. Somebody has to be it, otherwise planning projects go on for 50 years and nothing ever gets built.
Okay, I think my initial response is I think we have an introduction into that space, and I think we should work with the localities to kind of see how we could be supportive in that. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I think through the consultation process, planning district commissions are required to be notified when the environmental review records are filed and those steps in the process. So I think at a minimum, we could certainly be more proactive in providing comment on projects when we have been engaged with or have been, tuned into local public consultation processes, and be, I think, that provider of that information and documentation and verification that the community, in fact, was involved in this, and this is a community-driven priority.
And then, Amanda, I'd be looking maybe for maybe some of the benchmark communities to see how they handle this exact issue. Very honestly, we end up we do this great planning work for years and the funding happens and all of a sudden we're on the defensive because, literally somebody who drove in town on their motorcycle decides they have nothing to do and they want to oppose a project. And all of a sudden they get a lot of traction. I would love for this plan to show how do we go on the offensive and say that if these 3 roads were a priority for this region, we're going to get them done. And this organization can not only be the stakeholder or the convener, we can actually be the one who actually provides the cover to the elected officials to get the project done.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, when you're talking about this, I'm immediately thinking of the grievance process associated with Title VI. And that's one of the things that we are looking at because there is a required process where if somebody has a complaint about how Title VI was implemented, there is an established process. And one of the things that we're looking at is how to make that more accessible to the public, because I think right now they have to mail, I think, like 6 different letters to file a complaint. And that can be very, that can be very difficult for somebody who might not have resources, might not have a printer to execute that kind of process. So one of the things we're looking at is how to make that more accessible, and then you can identify those grievances earlier. And then if you don't have grievances, I'm thinking that you could point to that too, that this is a very accessible process, and no one complained at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's helpful, Tim. I think, again, it's sort of one of those things that we want to make sure that we're effectively communicating to the member jurisdictions how this can be of value to them. So,
Correct.
Well, thanks so much for that. I wanted to just be able to kind of give you all an update about where we are with those particular work orders. We're pretty excited about the 4 that we have in play. I am also working on 2 others to push out to the group of 6 to respond to, and really trying to kind of think through the importance of getting our messaging right. And so I think as we move along and in light of the prioritization workshop, couple things to share with you. I do expect that in the presentation to the full board and the full board in June and the finance committee in May, that we will be presenting a budget that would include additional personnel. One of those additional personnel would be a public outreach or public engagement coordinator. So someone who would spend the whole of their time in the agency coordinating across our program areas and really kind of quarterbacking. They would become the manager, if you will, of the OnCall program, and would also be coordinating with members of staff who are embedded in our program areas, transportation, natural resources, and community development and emergency management to support. So by no means are we saying that there's only one person on our staff that will be focused on community engagement and outreach, but there will be somebody who wakes up every day thinking about that and is guiding staff and how do we make sure we orient in a way that keeps our member jurisdictions engaged, our commissioners engaged, the general public engaged, and our stakeholders engaged. So this public engagement plan that is being funded by the Community Foundation and that AVID Core is helping us develop will, in my mind, really be kind of an implementation and a roadmap for that position in the agency. One of the things that we have encountered, and I'm sure it's not any kind of a surprise to you, is that as our organization has grown and evolved over time, so is our identity, and we want to make sure that we're being very clear with the public and our member jurisdictions about how we talk about that. So I've been contemplating pushing out a 5th task order to the team of OnCall firms, and Amanda's already kind of heard this because we've had conceptual discussions with all of the firms about this, that I think the work that we did to rebrand and change our, kind of go by name to PlanRVA has been very effective. It's been a really, I think, well-received transition in the community, and I think it's sparked a bit of excitement, quite frankly. And our reintroduction and that transition from a more bureaucratic kind of acronym based Richmond Regional Planning District Commission to PlanRVA. But with that, I think we've encountered still some confusion in the community. How does PlanRVA relate to the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization? How does it relate to the newly formed Central Virginia Transportation Authority? Where do the activities of one stop and the others start? And how does that interplay really focus? What is our relationship to the member jurisdictions and that kind of thing? So I'm contemplating developing a task order that would request assistance in what I've been referring to as brand differentiation, so that it can be very clear to the public, what each entity does, how they relate to each other. And, in the case of the RRTPO, that has been a very long-standing relationship, and PlanRVA providing that staff support to the Transportation Planning Organization, or some of our newer relationships with CVTA. How do we make sure that we are very clearly drawing the distinction of where one stops and the other starts? Then the natural fitting would be that a second phase of that could be to provide access to the on-call support to be able to develop, collateral material, the implementation of that brand differentiation. So, again, Mr. Thornton, if the CVTA wanted to, proceed with any kind of public outreach material or that kind of thing, this would be the opportunity to be able to procure that, I think, pretty seamlessly. Our Emergency Management Alliance has already set as a strategic objective for this year. They want to do more outreach to local government emergency managers, as well as private sector emergency managers. So they want to have some brochures and, other types of information and material about, why is it important to collaborate across the region when it comes to emergency preparedness and emergency management. So we're trying to be responsive to that and to be able to do that. But we think that first step is really to be kind of like, okay, how do we talk about this, and how do we have a consistent message across all of the different entities that PlanRVA is affiliated with? So that's kind of an effort in progress, and certainly would welcome your input on that. And I think it could very easily be something that, as this committee hopefully grows and evolves, it's something that you all help inform, because I think we have some really nice opportunities ahead of us to think about how we can propel the image of PlanRVA as being a regional support organization to our member jurisdictions, and being available to them, but also to be able to promote from our strategic planning process, really that we are a resource to the whole community. And, we show up in that space in a lot of different ways. So I just wanted to share that with you. One of the other task orders that we're pushing out is kind of along the same line.
Martha, just a second. Frank, any comments?
I'm kind
I
of
see you
saving my
smiling, I see you nodding. I figured you wanted to say something.
well, I'm kind of saving my comments. There's another period. I saw something on the agenda, so I'm kind of saving my comments.
Okay.
There. But what Ms. Heater said, that's spot on.
And I think, from my perspective, Amanda, I would be interested again in your experience from working with other organizations, because, to some degree, brand awareness, I'd put it this way. I mean, sometimes consultants are a little bit too polite, and they basically just nod and say yes to everything that an organization wants to try. I think the strategic plan laid out some guardrails about what this organization is an expert in and what we're not an expert in. So it's okay to say, no, we're not that organization. And it's okay for you guys to say, no, paper postcards in mailboxes don't work anymore. So we got to figure out a way to reach 5 years out and figure out where we want our brand differentiation to be, and have a roadmap to get us there, because we don't need necessarily, the consultants to be polite. When I take on an assignment, for a client, they basically, if they're a really good client, they're smart enough to say, Tim, I don't pay you to shut up. I pay you to tell me what you think I ought to be doing. So I think in this brand awareness, if we're going to be best in class, that's what I would like PlanRVA to be, as one of the best recognized regional planning organizations in America 5 years from now? How do we get there?
Absolutely. And I just want to clarify that we have not been awarded that task order, the brand differentiation task order. So I know that the community engagement piece is tied closely to that brand differentiation. But I think the brand differentiation task order is going to really dive into each entity and the messages associated with those entities, and then the materials, as Martha mentioned. So, I mean, hopefully we will be responding, but I'm not sure if we will be actually doing the work. So just wanted to add that in.
Yes, sir.
So that was the summary of kind of initiatives on the horizon, that last bullet in that section of the agenda. I know that the group has been meeting kind of intermittently, and one of the things I wanted to chat about, and I think, Tim, you've been thinking about this too, of, do we need to try to expand, frankly, the input that both you and Mr. Thornton have given to this process has been, I mean, really valuable. So I just wanted to get your counsel on whether we should try to expand the membership of the committee as we move into the new fiscal year, and how we should focus the use of your time in committee meetings, and what would be most useful for you. So
we definitely, and I have been giving it some thought, and I think, to some degree, the committee itself has to have a set of goals. Obviously the organization has, outreach and community engagement goals as an organization. And to some degree, it's my job to make sure this committee has goals. And one of those goals needs to have more of our commissioners on this committee. So, whether we do that by me pestering people, whether we do people by really sharing some of the great work and making sure people feel motivated to be part of it, that's what we need to do. But I hadn't thought about it through the aspect of really making sure we kick off the next fiscal year with that seated committee. But I think that ought to be our homework assignment, is to really populate it here in the next 60 days. So we're ready to roll starting in the next fiscal year. That's a great way to do it.
okay.
I'm not sure this would be an idea or not, but if we're doing that, how we're doing a kickoff meeting with some of the firms we're working with, but if we did like something like that for getting more commissioners onto our committee, just to give them like a presentation of what, like you said, the work we're doing and what we're about, versus just saying, hey, we need some members to join, who's interested, kind of thing, to kind of give a showcase or something of the work we've been, working on and what our goals are towards that.
So I'll think about that and make sure that is absolutely part of our committee update at the next board meeting.
Okay.
And then Martha, I'll work with you and I, and how we, if we get somebody who's interested, like you said, if we need to give them an orientation, we just need to be as customer friendly as we can. They're very, very smart, busy people. We just need to get them to focus a little bit of their smart, busy time on this challenge, which is a huge challenge. But it's also an important challenge, and that's why you got the grant, and that's why we've got people like Amanda helping us. So
I think too, worthwhile in that discussion might be to, and I don't know the answer to this question, so it's genuinely just something to put out on the table. But some organizations, even others that we support, include as part of their committee membership external persons. At the commission, we've generally speaking maintained our committees as members of the body, and so I do think that it might be important for us to think about whether or not we need to create some sort of space for external stakeholders to be regularly engaged in our public engagement strategy. Or not, and I think our commissioners have had varying opinions about making sure that the balance of our committee membership is elected officials, and really making sure that we hold close to accountability to the public. So I think that there's some balancing that we have to do there, but it's something I've been thinking about in the context of that discussion.
I think it's a great idea. So Frank, I go get 2 private sector people. You're going to have to convince 2 of your colleagues to be on the committee.
So, Well, yeah, I look forward to talking with you about that in the coming weeks.
Good
And I think it'd be great to also, as we move to nominations for our leadership structure for next fiscal year, maybe talk with the Vice Chairman Winslow and get his thoughts about where he'd like to see things move in the coming fiscal year. So, well, that was all that we had put together and prepared for today, but I wanted to make sure I left space and time for just you as members of the committees to sort of ask questions if you have more or other thoughts. I know that there have been other discussion items. I'll send a link out to you, but I know at the last meeting we talked a bit about regional signage, Mr. Thornton, and I did want to share with you that the Don't Trash Central Virginia effort has really taken off. We're really excited. I'm not going to be able to name all of the jurisdictions because there are a lot, but many of our jurisdictions have adopted the Don't Trash Central Virginia logo, and they've modified it with the Powhatan color scheme, and now it says Don't Trash Powhatan. And obviously Henrico has done the same with Keep Henrico Beautiful. And we've had a lot of interaction in Goochland County and New Kent County, and we're co-hosting a tribal organization litter cleanup day in June with Keep Virginia Cozy, which is in our little effort to create a branding campaign. It's pretty exciting that we've been able to team up with a statewide organization. So we're definitely generating some momentum there. So I'll send you after the meeting some links to some of the photos that we've collected of how localities have started to use that coordinated branding and messaging. And we're getting ready to partner with the city on one of their efforts, particularly around stormwater debris and making sure that we keep our waterways clean. And so it's just been really exciting to see how that kind of program that was born through partnership with Keep Henrico Beautiful has really grown to be a much bigger endeavor. So
I actually saw that signage at the Hopewell Riverwalk.
Oh,
It has
awesome.
Don't trash Hopewell.
That's so
Right by the
great.
trash can. I took
Yeah.
a picture and I sent it to our Don't Trash team. So I was just out there just visiting the spot, and then I was walking back to the car and I saw that. I was like, well, our plans are working, so that's good.
Yeah. It's really
And
neat.
see what we're doing, we're influencing behavior in a
Yeah.
positive way, it's a good thing.
Yeah, and Sid, I want to just give credit again to Sid. He and Rebecca Cazares, one of our new staff members, and Sarah Stewart have really been the masterminds behind that. And so, all the social media posting that we're doing around that is the work of them kind of brainstorming and looking at what other communities have done around litter prevention and really trying to kind of keep that messaging alive. And particularly, I don't know if you all have noticed where you spend time, but there's been a significant increase in kind of community litter because of PPE. So people finish their, with their mask when they walk out of a store or something like that, and they throw it on the ground. So we've really been trying to promote, awareness that you can't just throw that stuff on the ground. It's disposable, but it needs to go in, the proper containers, and really trying to make sure that people are aware that, if things get pushed into our stormwater drains, eventually that, has significant impacts on all of us, whether it's, cost of maintaining the systems or, pushing debris out into our waterways and affecting water quality. So, definitely want to make sure that our community is conscious of that.
I was actually talking to Sarah about this last week as a possible way of public outreach is as the diamond is opening up, we're going to have more people coming in, especially if they're going to have masks mandated. So if we can get some outreach out there about the litter and PPE litter and things like that, I think that'll be a great way to promote that in that process, whether it's on the board or signage outside. As we're getting more people to come out, that's something to be aware of, so we don't trash our stadiums and things like that as we're going to these events and things like that. So,
And if you would allow me, I'd like to take a few moments to mention what I call a Momo de Fleur métaphorique. On the board of supervisors, I'm the one who give out metaphorical flowers. And from time to time, we get criticism a lot about things. Sometimes what we don't receive is when we're doing a good job. And I want to mention to you, Ms. Heater, and also to Mr. Davey and others and the new team members coming on. I am extremely elated and proud, and because I'm looking at a vista from 1996 that we've been trying to get people to know that we even exist. The we at that time was the RRPTO and all of that. And the region is changing. We're becoming more urbanized. But I want to commend your office for having brought about these changes. As you know, bringing about change is not easy. But, you know, the area is growing. People are much more, I think, sophisticated about things. And I'm thinking that what I see now that we didn't have is we have a kind of regional thought pattern, which is good. And I think if we continue that trend, we'll do well. And as I tell members of the CDTA, the foundation we put in place is not for us, but it's for future persons who are going to be impacted by transportation and just by local government in general. So I just want to extend these metaphorical flowers to your office and the new initiatives that we have. And please keep that up. And I think that, you know, this region will be a destination point if we keep this up. And I do like something that Mr. Davis said too, to one of our new members coming on, and that is, we don't want to be yes people. We want to make sure that we try to do what we can. What we cannot do, we must say we can't do that. You know, this is not the moment in time for that. So, so family kudos, okay?
Thank you. I'll pass that along to the rest of the staff. And
Please do.
We've heard your urging and your encouragement, and I hope we can fulfill what you want us to be.
Well said, Frank. Thank you for sharing that.
So Tim, that's all I had at this point in time. I think probably given the discussion we've had today, we will just follow up. I'll follow up with you, and we can make kind of some ideas about next steps, and then we could do a doodle for the next meeting.
Oh, one last thought about your wondering about new membership. You know, don't forget one of the challenges we've had as elected officials and, PlanRVA, we know about the process, but the average citizens don't. So maybe it might be good to think about having some citizen members, have them, because sometimes they give us a framework that we don't think about.
Yeah.
And so that might be efficacious, give it a thought and try it. No one is getting remunerated for that, but sometimes citizens can be extremely helpful.
Okay. Yeah. I think.
Is that, Martha, is that where you were going, with your thought about committee members? Or the other thought that came to mind as you were talking is, as Amanda and her team are engaging some of the external stakeholders, they could also be possibly committee members, because then you get, the added benefit of not only awareness, but you get their expertise in their particular line. Thinking about Floyd, Metropolitan Business League, whether or not he would be willing to serve on a committee would be a great example where we get not only his time on this committee, but we get his experience in his mission as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking kind of on both levels. I think, our reality is that we are a small staff, and it's going to take kind of linking arms with other organizations to really be able to reach the 1 million people plus in our region. So I think it's going to be through those institutional partnerships and really being careful and creating meaningful relationships with them. And then also being able to get kind of the on the ground perspective, so that we don't, kind of like you said before, like postcards and mailboxes, if everybody's just gonna throw them on the ground, we need to make sure that we're doing things that are going to reach the people that we are trying to. So.
Right. Well, I like that idea. So we should develop that a little bit more. And like I said, I think we've given ourselves a deadline of having a more robust committee in place by the time we start the next fiscal year.
yeah, I think it's great timing for that. And, when we get to July and appointments come on, that, that'll be one of the first orders of business for our new chair. So
Right.
it'd be great timing to kind of tee that up.
Good thinking.
Last thing I'll say is just our perpetual plug. We've talked about this a lot in the committee meetings, but again, Mr. Thornton, thank you for the invitation. Chet and I will both be participating in the Fairfield district meeting on the 17th. So that'll be a chance for us to talk about.
Now the date has changed.
Oh, it has. Okay.
Yes. I think the date is the 25th or 26th. It's a Monday.
Okay. Okay. I'll reach out to your staff and get updated. Okay. Thanks for that. I'm glad I mentioned it. But we will be there. We're excited.
We talked about that almost a year ago.
I know. Yeah, you're right. So thank you for the invitation. We're really excited about that. And I mean, those are the kinds of things I think that we want to try to do more of. So thank you. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody. We really appreciate it. And Amanda, thanks for being with us.
Amanda, thanks for joining us.
Larry, thanks too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye everybody. Thank you.